Welcome back to World of Immersion. Today we're going to be talking about the one and only Knott's Berry Farm, and we're going to be ranking every single one of their 8 roller coasters. Now, it has been a while since we've done a ranking for Knott's Berry Farm, and a lot has changed, especially with the removal of 2 of their roller coasters, one of which being Timberline Twister, their kiddie coaster. Now, that will be being replaced with a brand new family coaster opening up next year. However, we're not going to be including that in this list since it's not open yet. And the other being Montezuma's Revenge, which unfortunately looks like it may never reopen again. So with this list, we're just going to be talking about the 8 currently operating roller coasters. Now, before we start today's video, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss when we have brand new content. In the new year, we have tons of new parks we're going to, so be sure to stay tuned for all of that. With that being said, though, let's get right into the video. Starting off, we're going to be talking about our least favorite coaster in the park, and that honor goes to the one and only Coast Rider. Now, this Wild Mouse coaster, while it doesn't have the worst layout in the world, it definitely has some of the worst restraints in the world. These things dig into your shins, and they really hurt. If you're anything over 4 feet tall, it is really going to kill your shins the entire ride. Other than that, the ride is not that bad. It's pretty smooth, and it's a pretty solid layout. It's one of the better layouts of the Wild Mouse. I like the ones that feature the big drop. It's just really the restraints and the small cars that kill this ride for me. But like I said, it's not an awful coaster. If you're a kid, it's definitely a great ride. And it's not a bad coaster to have in last place at Knott's Berry Farm, in my opinion. Coming in at number 7 is going to be Jaguar. Now, this coaster is very unique. While it's not super forceful, it does provide such a great scenic view of the park, and it's a really, really long ride. Additionally, it has a really, really long train. This thing is super long. I believe it's almost like 20 cars long, which means if you sit in the back, it's going to be a very different experience than in the front, because while the front is still going down that drop, you're going to still be going up the lift. It's a really weird experience. This ride even features 2 lift hills. It's got a lot of straight sections, so it's got a really funky layout. And it's not the smoothest, but like I said, it provides a great scenic view of the park. It's a nice tour around all of the Fiesta Village area. It used to go through the old loop of Montezuma's Revenge, which was definitely like the highlight of the ride. However, unfortunately, the loop is gone. But it's still a solid ride, a great ride for families, and it's got some pretty decent theming in the queue too. Next, coming in at number 6 is going to be Pony Express. Now, this launch coaster is honestly pretty solid. Usually, I'm not a huge fan of this type of ride where you're riding on like the back of a horse or a motorcycle. This one's not that bad. It's pretty relatively smooth. The launch is pretty fun. The only really issue I have with this ride is how short it is. This is by far one of the shortest coasters I've ever been on. It really is just the launch, a turn, maybe a few airtime hills, and then one more turn back into the station. It's a super short ride. The other issue I have with this ride is how long the line takes. Because of these restraints and the way that these cars are configured, the operations can take forever. And even if they run 2 trains, it doesn't really do much because of how fast the ride is. The operations are just super slow, and that means that line gets super long. So I really don't get a chance to do this ride unless the park is super empty. But even then, I usually choose to skip it because it's not really my favorite ride on the planet. But like I said, it's a fun ride. It's a great ride for kids, and the launch is pretty fun. It's definitely a good starter launch coaster, in my opinion. Now, moving into the top 5, this is where you get the really good rides at Knott's Berry Farm. These are definitely the rides that I choose to hit on almost every single visit. And starting off at number 5, we have Sierra Sidewinder. Now, this spinning coaster, don't be fooled by its size. It is very intense. It's a super smooth ride. And even though it's in Camp Snoopy, it's definitely one of the more intense rides in the park, in my opinion. It's got a really fun layout. My only issue, once again, is that it's a pretty short ride. If it was a little longer, it'd definitely be a lot better. But like I said, it's still a great ride. It's really forceful. You pull some really great Gs, especially during those helixes. If you're facing inwards, it's going to be a really intense moment. It's super fast. It feels like it's whipping around those turns really fast. And it's crazy to me that this ride is in Camp Snoopy. Right now, it's the only coaster in Camp Snoopy, and it's definitely one of the more intense rides in the park. Next, coming in at number 4. Now, these are the big 4 major coasters of Knott's Berry Farm. I feel like most people have these 4 as their top 4. It's just really the order that the people put them in. And at number 4, for me, I have Silver Bullet, the B&M invert. Now, this ride is massive. However, unlike Sierra Sidewinder, I feel like this ride is the opposite. It's so big, but it's significantly less forceful than it would appear to be. The drop, in my opinion, is probably the worst drop on a B&M invert, and the elements are just way too drawn out to provide any forces. The most forceful part of the ride is, of course, that final helix into the brake run, which definitely pulls some really good Gs. But other than that, it's not my favorite coaster. I definitely prefer the other two inverts in the state of California, that being Flight Deck at California's Great America and Batman the Ride at Six Flags Magic Mountain, the latter being my favorite invert in the state. Definitely because those rides are a lot more intense. But don't get me wrong, Silver Bowl is definitely a great ride. It's one of the smoothest coasters in the park for sure, so that's why a lot of the general public is going to like this ride. But in my opinion, it's just not the best, and it really is, especially because of that drop. That drop is really weak. But coming in at number 3 is going to be the newest coaster to open at Knott's Berry Farm. That is Hang Time, opening back in 2018. Hang Time is still a fantastic ride. While it has gotten a little bit bumpy, some of those dips can be a little bit jolty, it's still a great ride, and it's got some of the most comfortable trains, some great restraints. That vertical lift is still terrifying. You feel like you're falling out backwards. The drop is still amazing with the way it hangs you over that drop like for around 5 to 7 seconds before it actually drops you. And the drop itself is incredible too. You get some great airtime. The inversions are really fun. They provide obviously a lot of hang time. And there's some solid pops of airtime on the ride as well. Once again, at Knott's Berry Farm, they have a lot of short coasters. This is definitely one of them. It's a shorter ride, but it's still a great coaster. The line also moves pretty decently fast because they're great at operations at this ride. And it's just overall a really fun coaster. That's the best way I can describe this coaster. It's just a fun ride. But coming in at number 2 is the ride that just recently reopened after a long closure. For almost 2 years it was closed, and that is Accelerator. I'm so happy that this ride is back open. It is one of my favorite coasters at Knott's Berry Farm. Definitely one of my favorite coasters just ever. That first launch is so forceful. It really is crazy. It might be the most forceful launch I have been on. I think it's a more forceful launch than its sister coasters with King Deca, Top Thrill Dragster, and Stormrunner. I think Accelerator is the most forceful out of all of those launches. And while the layout isn't nearly as good as the other three because of how small it is, those overbanks can still be pretty fun, and the airtime you get going over that top hat is crazy. It's also amazing that this ride still just has those lap bars. I think that's really incredible and definitely sets it apart from the other ones. It's such a fun coaster. I'm really glad this ride is back open. Once again, though, this is one of those shorter coasters. Knott's Berry Farm really has an issue with how short their coasters is. That leads us to our number 1 coaster, because this coaster is definitely not short at all, and that is going to be Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider is one of my favorite coasters on the planet. It's my second favorite wooden coaster, only second to El Toro over at Six Flags Great Adventure, and is my favorite coaster in the entire state of California. I think this ride seriously is perfect. It is so insanely smooth. It is one of the smoothest coasters I've been on, definitely the smoothest wooden coaster I have been on, and it's such a long ride. The layout is fantastic. That first drop is really fun. The first entire half is much more drawn out with big elements, big airtime hills, and some turnarounds. And then as soon as you go around where the mid-course used to be, they actually remove that mid-course so you go faster through the second half. But after you drop off of that mid-course, that drop is insane. And you start flying through the rest of the structure. You're going back around through the structure underneath all the supports. It's crazy. You get some crazy airtime, some insane laterals. And then this night ride is one of the best night rides on the planet. It's pitch black, just a little bit of lights throughout the ride. If you get a back row night ride, I'm telling you, it is the best experience on a coaster you can have. Definitely be sure to check out Ghost Rider when you're at Knott's Berry Farm. However, do be warned, this gets an insanely long line because of how bad the operations are on this coaster. So be sure to hit it early on in the day before the line gets really long. But that's going to do it for our ranking of every single roller coaster at Knott's Berry Farm. Be sure to comment down below what your ranking is of these rides, as well as if you're excited for their brand new family launch coaster that is coming next year. Thank you so much for watching World of Immersion today. Be sure to stay tuned for all of our brand new videos, and we'll catch you in the next one.